Good evening, YouTubers. So I was asked today a couple of questions which I thought I wouldn't just respond in the comments, but rather I would do a fairly informal video. I'll probably, and that is to answer those questions, I will probably follow up sometime with a more formalized set of arguments for my opinion, but so I'll be pretty much going off the cuff here. So I'm sorry if that doesn't suit you, but I think it's for the time being the best way I can do it and respond in a timely fashion. So the first question, and both questions are from zodismygod.filler. What do you think about System D? And he says that I personally don't think it's that bad. Plus in 5 years something else could come along. Okay, and what do you think about Arch Linux? Now I'm going to handle the first question. Okay, so what do I think about System D? Well, first of all, I think we should explain what System D is, because for some of you, System D is going to be something that you might have heard in the news but not understood, or you might have seen a video about, but still, again, it hasn't been well explained or something like that. So basically System D is a collection of daemons. Now, for those of you who don't know what a daemon is basically a program that sits in the background and may receive input and deliver output. Now that's a very generic way of describing a daemon, but what daemons usually do is provide services. So when you connect, for example, to a remote machine via SSH, what you're doing is actually connecting to the OpenSSH server daemon, otherwise known as SSHD, or just for short SSH. So going back to what System D does, System D is basically a framework for managing services and handling the boot process. We can't really talk intelligently about System D without describing what the alternatives are and what has been used before it. So what has been used before it was sysv init. So I'm going to just do a search for that under Wikipedia. Okay. Now, sysv init tends to use a bunch of Bourne shell scripts, and you have a set of run levels. Now, what I'm using at the moment is sysv init. I'm in Linux from scratch at the moment. Linux from scratch includes two possibilities for an init system. You can use sysv init, or you can use System D. Now, let's have a look at what it looks like. Okay, so I'm in /etc//init.d, and what this does is it has a set of scripts, and those scripts are indeed called depending on the setup in here. We see we have a set of run levels: run level 0, run level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this S1. The two that I am most familiar with are 3 and 5. 3, I believe, is essentially kind of like single user mode, where you don't have a desktop running, you might not have network services running. Of course, this all depends on what's in what's being pointed to in rc3. So if we go ls rc3.d, oh, ls or rc3. And we can see what's being called here, and in fact we can just do a -l at the end to see where they're pointing, and you can see they're actually all pointing to scripts that are in init.d. So using this, we basically can find out how GPM is started. So if I go cat GPM, and we can see that there's a little bit of descriptive info here, but what we do is we have a set of case statements, and those case statements are for if you want to start, stop, force reload, restart, status. Yeah, and then we also have the usage one, which will just output what options are available. Now, that was the old way of doing things. Okay, so I guess the next question is what other ones are there? Okay, and why did we swap over from, in most distributions now, why did we swap over from sysvinit to systemd? Well, systemd is able to proactively manage the state, monitor and manage the state of daemons, whereas sysvinit is pretty much able to start and stop and do these other things. It's not something that sits there, actively managing them. You would normally find out how a process is going, perhaps by using ps-e. So if we go ps-e, we can see, for example, that cupsd is there. I think we could probably find more information by going like this. And look, I'm not going to pretend that I know how to read all of this because I don't. Okay, but sure enough, I could find some information out about it, and it's the output's plain and clear. Okay. However, I can't actually actively know the state very easily, and that's what systemd does. It enables the control of daemons at a very fine-grained level. So, going back to it, it is an init system that is used by some Linux distributions. I'd actually argue most of the upstream distributions, that is the RPM and deb-based distributions, are now using systemd. Arch Linux also uses systemd, and as you can see here, that's in lieu of Unix systemv, or sysv init as it's colloquially called. You can see here that it's managed to bootstrap the user space and then manage all processes. Basically, therefore, systemd is essentially PID1, just like any other init system is. It's the first program that is called by the kernel, and it's responsible for bringing up the services required by the kernel to produce a usable system. I guess a couple of things that are worthwhile noting is that it's actually the original authors include Lennart Pottering, who's also of note for developing Pulse Audio, among other things. I believe he is a Red Hat employee, and consequently you'll also see that Fedora user, you can see Red Hat here, works for Red Hat, and he's written some programs, and therefore some of those programs get previewed in Fedora and ultimately become part of the mainstream distributions ultimately, since Fedora does have some sway over the direction of GNU+Linux overall. What alternatives are there? So I mentioned before that you could be using sysvinit, but there are also there's OpenRC. Okay, and OpenRC is an init system that's used by Gentoo. It's the default system init and for Gentoo, and that's not just because I'm reading it there, it's because I've had to deal with it before. Now, OpenRC is interesting because one of the purported pros of systemd is that it does parallelized daemon starting. In other words, it tries to bring up daemons by using dependency management and bring up as many as it can, as many as the processor will allow, in an effort to bring up the machine as quickly as possible upon a boot or reboot. Now, OpenRC happens to, last time at least I saw, was it was doing, well, you can see here actually, it normally does serial server startup, and for those who don't know what that means, it means start a service, wait for it to complete, bring up another service, and start and wait for it to complete. And that's exactly how sysv init used to work, using the bash scripts. It would just move progressively from one to the other. Well, obviously there would be a C component of sysv init itself, which would then call the various components as it saw fit to do that. So OpenRC does have some features of it. Now, I guess we should talk about the last one that I want to talk about today, which is Upstart. Okay, so Upstart was developed by Canonical. It was probably the first Linux, and I mean that Linux-based, Linux kernel init system. So an init system built for the purposes of starting a Linux system in parallel. That's the key thing there. To have that parallel boot, and yeah, so you can see it had an event-driven model that allowed it to start things and to operate asynchronously, which means to not need things to be synchronous in order to operate on them. So the decision was made by I think some 12 months back, or maybe even longer. I don't know the exact date, but it was that that the current version of Debian would use systemd. There was a lot of controversy I should say, at the time, to the point where actually a fork of Debian was produced called Dev1, and Debian without systemd. And I think that this website, although it's probably very, very biased in some ways, I think it used to have anyway some information about why no systemd. I think there might even be a boycott. We'll see. Oh, without systemd. Here we go. So there used to be a lot of information on the Dev1 website about why one wouldn't use systemd. And let's have a look here. I was hoping that I can tell you some of my own opinions, but it's probably worthwhile reading from the experts. Here we go. Arguments against systemd. Okay. Right. So, I'm not going to talk about stability promises because I don't have any personal anecdotes to offer around there. So far, I've found that it is stable. I use it on my Debian installs, including my Raspbian install, and I have not particularly had some future compatibility issues or backward compatibility stability issues, or operational stability issues. They're talking here obviously about not stability as in it crashes, but stability as in what worked in the past will work in the future. What I can talk about though is scope creep. You see, udev, which instantiates or should I say enumerates device nodes in /dev, that is the way that Unix systems typically allow access to devices, was incorporated into systemd. And that's strange because it used to be that udev was a separate package altogether. It also has logging. Usually you would use syslog-ng or something like that to do your system logging, to put your logs in /var/log. but now systemd has a daemon called journald, which does binary logging. And the problem with binary logging, I guess, and something I've had a little bit of personal experience is that if you don't have a working journald at the time, well, you're kind of going to be a little bit stuck, especially if you're not used to that workflow of trying to get access to the binary logs. Whereas if you simply had text-based logging, you are very able to just go and take a look at those logs by using a typical editor such as VI, Vim, or you could use Nano, or any of the other editors that are available. You could even just cat it out if you wanted to. Whereas this is not entirely possible with journald. There seems to be that they're also adding a whole bunch of things here. What was the other thing I was going to say? I was also going to say the other editor were VI versus Emacs. That's right. Sorry, I had a bit of a brain stall there. One other thing, and this is sort of more of a community thing. I suppose my issue with the community thing for systemd is that systemd is written by a small, well, it seems to me anyway, a small group of developers. It does say and others, which is fine. Maybe it's a little bigger these days, but for me, I don't mind, say, having a whole bunch of different developers do POSIX compliant services, or POSIX compliant components of a Unix system, a Unix-like system like Linux, GNU+Linux. I would be very worried, however, if the entire system was made by a small group of people, or if a significant component of the system were developed by a small number of people in this day and age. Admittedly, back in the day, the Linux component, the Linux kernel, was written by a small number of people, initially Linus Torvalds and then some friends, or people online or whatever like that. But the thing about it is that for something that does init stuff and has control over, for example, login.d is a replacement for ConsoleKit. ConsoleKit doing the authentication, some of the authentication and logins via the display managers and things like that. That's a problem for me personally, and that's why I use sysv init. I want my init system to be fairly dumb, to just bring up my services as I see fit, to have high visibility to how it does it. And that's another point that I need to bring up. As I showed you before, and we can just do it again. Right, you see that, right? Now I'm going to have to mount a drive here and hope to high hell that I've got the right one for you. Oh, that's probably, let's just go anyway. Actually, we better find out which one we're talking about, hey. Well, it's looking pretty promising to be a Debian testing system that I've got here. So, in fact, cat etc or yeah, fine. So, so let's have a look at here. Find name. Now, systemd has a bunch of service files. How about we take a look at, hopefully I've got a GPM one. Actually, GPM. Maybe we don't. Might have to borrow this one here. Okay, fine. So a cat. Oh, that's no good. That's not what I was looking for. We might try this one. No, this is not helpful at all. That's not very helpful. bear with me as I find my bearings. Alright. Oh, of course. Oh. Oh, it's a broken okay. So let's have a look. CD. I feel like I'm being a bit of a numpty here. I don't really use systemd that much. What? Oh. Okay. Well, that's going to be a bit of a bugbear. I was hoping I could get access to that. CD. And then hopefully I can just go like that. Never mind the double slashing. And go cat. Let's have a look. What's a good one? SSH. SSH dot. Alright, now we're down to business. So as you can see here, it's declarative. It's telling you a configuration. In here it tells you what it's going to do. So if you want to start, it's going to log blah blah blah. It's going to, if such and such device and this protocol, then do blah blah blah, invalid configuration, whatever. Okay. If stop, I'm going to log info message blah blah blah. Kill process / you say yeah, you know, evaluate, return value, blah blah blah. So it's telling you what it's actually doing. It's what they call imperative. It's telling you how it's going to do what it's going to do. Whereas this, it just is declarative. It's saying, you know, in order to do that, say this. In order to do that, say that. But it's not telling you how it's going to do it. You see? So that's one of the issues that people will have with systemd. So I would say that basically the pros with systemd, it's because it's got parallelized boot, it's fast, and it's got decent support because of its Red Hat, you know, its Red Hat background. It replaces some daemons that are no longer receiving support, like console kit, right? It replaces console kit, which is no longer being maintained. Okay, so for X11 display managers, it requires a minimal amount of porting. It was integrated into, you know, version 30. So in other words, login D is available for that because console kit is no longer being maintained. So it's kind of advantageous in one way that someone's taking up the slack to maintain a login system, but the problem is it's all under, I mean, it's got apparently its own cron implementation. You know, it's got scope creep. It does. Okay. I'm not going to go into the poor design. The unit files being significantly shorter than the script. Well, I don't know. I've just showed an example of just one, but it's not an apples for apples comparison. Let's have a look at just one ls cat sshd. There's the SSHD. In fact, we can go number of lines SSHD 65 there, and we can go number of lines service, and it's 15 lines. So there's probably some truth to that. However, you got to remember that this is also doing tricks in the background that we can't see. So how many lines are that? I have no clue. Yeah, so basically for me it's about, like, it doesn't just do one thing well, it does a whole bunch of things allegedly well, and but it does it in a way that's broken out into sort of a modular fashion, but nonetheless it has a cultural monoculture. It has a monoculture in that it's a set of developers doing so much for the GNU+Linux architecture. That, to me, that's kind of problematic. I don't mind having a whole bunch of developers doing things that are kind of POSIXly compatible or whatever. So there are some drawbacks with it. So overall, my preference is that if I have a choice, I don't use systemd. I won't boycott a system because it uses systemd, and that's almost impossible anyway if you're going to be a serious GNU+Linux user, because Debian uses it. To the best of my knowledge, OpenSUSE uses it. Ubuntu now uses it. Linux Mint will use it. LFS has the option to use it. So, Gentoo doesn't. You don't have to use it. Slackware, you don't have to use it, or you don't use it. Gentoo does have support for systemd, by the way. And here's another problem I have, which is not really systemd's fault. It is in one respect, because Leonard Pottering asked the GNOME team to make systemd a de facto dependency of GNOME. And then that is that software is going to start to rely on systemd to even run on a GNU+Linux system. And further to that, actually, systemd uses underlying kernel features of the Linux kernel that are specific to the Linux kernel to do its magic. So, and that's something that people probably find problematic as well, because it's not portable. It's not portable to another Unix system. And I suppose in some regards, some people would say it's modeled after LaunchD, which is on the OS X system, the Mac OS X system. I can't really comment about that, except I have heard this, so you might want to do your own research about that. That pretty much concludes what I have to say about systemd. Unavoidable pretty much, unless you're using something like LFS, Gentoo for a while at least, or Slackware. So the next question is what do I think about Arch Linux? Well, I think the best way to talk about Arch Linux is to compare it to something that's bare bones, like perhaps Gentoo. Now, Arch Linux is a binary distribution that also has a framework, the ABS, for building packages. Now, I've used the ABS before and didn't have much luck, but I've heard reports that's actually quite good. It does have a source system, and I have found before previously that Arch Linux lacked packages that I like to use. For example, at the time it lacked Virt Manager and KVM support, and that was pretty much you're going to have to pull that in yourself from the Arch user repository, the AUR. Or you could probably build a package for it using the ABS if you wanted to. You could take a template or something. Arch Linux is very bleeding edge, so that straight away counts it out as a server distribution for me. I tend to use Debian as my server distribution because of the stability that it shows and the lack of, the plentiful packages. If I'm going to go back to comparing it to Gentoo, Gentoo can be as stable or unstable as you want it to be. Gentoo is by default very stable because it uses a fairly conservative set of packages in the stable repository. Likewise, however, you can actually choose the testing repository, which you might find mileage might vary depending on which packages you choose from the testing repository. The fortunate thing about Arch Linux is you can get things up and running very, very quickly. And the another advantage of it is it has what I'd say is the best wiki out, that also a lot of the advice that you receive in Arch Wiki will apply in general to other distributions. There might be Arch Linux specifics, but you can still apply the general knowledge there because overall it is a GNU+Linux system. Things have improved with its package management system. Its package management system a while there didn't use any package signing, which essentially meant that you could do some sort of DNS spoofing and then tell a person's system to point to a set of servers or a server with bad packages and end up downloading malware. But that's not the case anymore. They do use package signing, to do these things. I guess the moving over to comparing it to Gentoo, it probably doesn't have that. Its build system is probably not as mature as Gentoo's. Gentoo's is pretty much a complete source distribution, but it's quicker to get things up and running than Gentoo. So it probably has some benefits there. I would say that the Arch Linux is an intermediate to advanced operating system. That is, you'd be required to be an intermediate to advanced user to use it. On the other hand, Gentoo is definitely really in the advanced level. The one thing that's common to both of them is the install instructions are manual, very manual indeed. So if we look at the Arch Linux installation instructions, well, it used to be that you could use a Slackware-like menu, but you don't do that anymore. So Slackware has a sort of it has an ncurses menu. So here are the installation instructions. They're a lot simpler than Gentoo's, but they're still manual. And if you're a little bit afraid of what or you're a bit inexperienced rather in what you're doing, you could end up having dramas and end up on the IRC page before the IRC asking people for help straight away. Compare that to Gentoo though. The Gentoo handbook is very extensive. I haven't used it for a while because I've been using LFS. But if you just go and have a look at it, I mean, they're offering it for a whole bunch of architectures as well. I think Gentoo really does support a lot more architectures. We can actually have a look at it. If ARM's your biz, then you can use Arch Linux. But let's have a look. Wikipedia, Arch Linux. Okay. And you see here it's supporting basically 3 architectures, whereas to a certain extent Gentoo is supporting many architectures here. 9 architectures or something. So there's a lot going on there. So if we look at installation, let's have a look here, and here it is. Here's the install instructions are incredibly detailed. So, okay, so what's my preference? What it comes down to for me is that Arch Linux is way too bleeding edge for my liking, so therefore updates come thick and fast. It's not as mature with source-based installation, and anyone who's watched my videos, I'm a big fan of being able to audit what the hell's going on in your system, and having the having source code on your system is probably the source code that was used to build your system, and having that actually on your system is probably one of the best ways of being able to audit what's going on in your system. So you can understand, like, oh, I've got this package and that dependency was for that. That's pretty much how my LFS works. I kind of have an intuitive understanding of what's going on. Gentoo provides a solid framework called Portage to manage that, and Portage is excellent in the way it is able to handle both source-based packages and binary packages, along with the GenToolKit. And the GenToolKit is a set of it basically complements Portage in that it can handle even issues right down to the shared object level, shared object dependency handling. So in the end, it's personal choice, but I would say that my personal choice is GNU+Linux over Arch Linux. Now, I had to compare it to something. I don't use GNU+Linux at the moment. I tend to use Linux from scratch and Debian. But if I had to, if I had to make a choice between 2 distros that were going to be sort of similar, somewhat similar in nature, it would be GNU+Linux. And the other thing I suppose to mention about GNU+Linux is that you're not required to use systemd. I try and tend to not boycott systemd, as I said before, but just sort of prefer using sysvinit or a BSD style init system or something like that if I have a choice. So that's another reason. Whereas Arch Linux was an early adopter to systemd, and that for me is sort of a drawback. So anyway, guys, I hope you liked this discussion about systemd, Gentoo, and Arch Linux, or specifically systemd and Arch Linux, and then just kind of comparing that to Gentoo. If you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to bring you more content soon. I should have some things, some technical content soon. Anyway, guys, have a good night. Bye.